bootlegging the music today, as you can probably hear, as you now hear me put the microphone down. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for downloading this wherever I'm going to post it, because right now I'm having trouble getting this show on iTunes, so I'm going to have to put it through one of the other shows. Thank you to the Retro Gamers, Larry.
And Anthony.
And that right there was our new intro song, Come and Find Me B-Mix by Eric Skiff. You can find him on SoundCloud, and I'll post some information at the body of the
make some cool 8-bit music.
Yeah, actually really cool 8-bit music. He had a lot of songs there, but that's the one that we're going to choose. And okay. So, to pull the curtain back a little bit, this is going to be the third attempt that we try and discuss something like this.
Well, we discussed it twice before successfully, but your technical skills with your computer has been somewhat lacking.
Computer is perfectly fine. It's the phone that had a problem with that I was recording into. So, we shall see how it works here. Basically, what we talked about before, and we're going to talk about before again, and we're going to do it a third time today, is video game movies based on video game franchises. And they have a very poor history.
They have a disastrous history for the most part, yeah.
Looking at the list here, very, very disastrous. But we're gonna discuss it. I'm sure we each have our own ideas. Is not good or bad as far as quality, just what you like. 'Cause, you can even like a bad movie every now and again.
Everything is subjective to the viewer.
Or the listener in this case. So, running through the history, them being... that's what I'm looking for. Not nostalgically bad, just historically bad. Do you think it's just because of the quality of movie? You think it's the stories? You just think people aren't interested? If they play the game, why watch a movie about it?
No, I think the problem is with video games, because they're so involved and so in depth, there's a larger scope in a video game, where, you have so many things you have to accomplish in a game, so the story is bigger, the world is bigger. And then you got to figure out how to turn that into a 2-hour movie, and to condense it in a way. A lot of screenwriters and directors and Hollywood in general, it's kind of they've been tripping over themselves trying to condense these giant video games into a smaller scale kind of film.
Yeah, and the earliest one that I can remember, I think even on this list, is Super Mario Brothers. I remember reading about it in Nintendo Power. I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be awesome. Finally on the big screen, the Mushroom Kingdom. Mario Luigi, a game I've been playing at that point almost 10 years. I guess by the time it came out, I figured Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo can't go wrong.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with a British man and a Puerto Rican.
Playing two Italians. So,
yep.
But it was horribly gone awry. And I just base that on story. I mean... Definitely, what's his face? Who played Dennis Hopper is a great actor, but as King Koopa, as like a human King Koopa, meaning they went so far away from the source material.
Well, the biggest problem with Super Mario Brothers was, first off, you had a very basic premise. The whole idea of Super Mario is, guy saves girl. Mm-hmm. We've seen that in tons of films. Problem with this was. You're dealing with basically, sci-fi fantasy elements. A plumber who goes through a pipe and winds up in a whole different world, and you're basically fighting, a big dinosaur kind of guy. And to be honest with you, there was no budget for special effects and whatnot, so they made the changes they needed to make, and unfortunately, we wound up with the giant turd that is Super Mario Brothers the movie.
Well, if the Sony hacks brought us anything, it was that. They plan on doing a new Super Mario Brothers movie, but animated.
Well, that's the way to go with I would say with Super Mario Brothers, because unless you do live action CGI type of stuff, animated seems to make the most sense with them because you can do whatever you want in animated. Just ask Disney, Pixar, and all of them. Pixar just made Wreck-It Ralph, which was It was a video, it was a movie about video game characters, and they succeeded, I think, on all fronts with that one because, again, they kept it basic. It was more about the main character and the story and the journey the main character went through, and because it was animated, they had the freedom to do what they wanted with it.
Very true, and I think you can get away more of the story it being animated. You know what I mean? Like it's more believable.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely more believable, especially when you're talking about video games, because let's face it, characters in video games do very cartoonish things.
Yeah, very much so.
Mario Brothers is the perfect example of you start out as a small guy who eats a mushroom and gets bigger, eats a flower and shoots fire. I mean, it's completely fantastical.
So, and I'm kind of surprised when you look at the history of video game movies, there was only one animated movie.
Final Fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Spirits Within was probably the, I think one of, if only, although there was a Street Fighter animated film.
Well, I'm talking like
domestic.
Theatrically released. I mean, that Street Fighter animated movie was fantastic.
That was actually very
the
good.
Animated movie.
And the Final Fantasy movie, to be honest with you, I actually enjoyed it. I think a lot of people had issues with it because it strayed away from an actual Final Fantasy video game. Like, it wasn't based on a video game. They kind of went their own route with it. But I actually thought it was pretty good. And then Japan made... they actually made one based off of Final Fantasy VII called Advent Children,
yes.
Which I also really enjoyed. But
that one.
Well, the reason why I enjoyed it though is because it was based off of the video game. If you didn't play the video game, I don't know if you understood the movie at all.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it just because of the fact that I played through Final Fantasy VII, which is one of my favorite games of all time. So
okay, but it's now you have dabbled a little bit in Hollywood.
I have.
So
and when you say a little bit, you mean a little bit, very
enough.
little.
You got your feet wet. What do you?
They dried very quickly.
like, what do you, in your humble opinion, in all honesty, what do you think would make a good movie? Do you think would the script have to be where you take a movie and you pretty much redo the story in the video game, or do you branch off for almost like a different adventure? What do you think would probably make it better?
I think you kind of have to blur the line and do both if you want to be successful, because what you want to do is you want to keep the core fan base of the video game itself. Mm-hmm. So the only way to do that, I believe, would be to incorporate some of the elements from the actual franchise. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side of it, you're going to want to generalize it a bit and make the story, interesting and palatable to a general audience, because let's face it, granted, the video game audience, video game audiences are growing and growing, as time goes on. Just look at, your World of Warcrafts and stuff like that. But you still want to cater to a general movie audience. So I feel like you just need to do both. Okay. And of course, just keep the regular, just the regular idea and concept of what makes a good movie. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like that kind of gets lost along the way, because everybody's trying, if they're trying to make an homage, or they're trying to honor the original content, and the problem is, like I said earlier, there's too much content to fit into a 2-hour film. It just becomes pretty much like a burden, almost, for the filmmakers and the audience alike.
I mean, with the number of video game movies, we have a list here. The bad list is much longer than the good list.
Oh yeah.
But when you look at the good list, there's 5 movies on, and you know what? I agree with you.
And these are all subjective as to what's good and bad.
Totally. Because there's some of these bad movies. I mean, DOA, it's a horrible movie, but it's goofy enough that I quite enjoyed it. But the good list we have, just run it off real fast. It's 5 movies.
Well, I think it's easy to look at and see why they're good.
Totally.
So it was Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil,
the first one,
Silent Hill,
which I didn't see, but I heard it was
is
good.
Debatable.
Okay, fair enough.
It's really debatable.
Fair enough.
Tomb Raider,
the first one again,
and Final Fantasy.
Now, what I was getting back before,
and we're not talking about like record-breaking Oscar.
No. This is just fun to watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Mortal Kombat versus Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Mortal Kombat's going to be better.
Well, I mean, sequels can always do better than the first ones, but I think the problem where you point that out is like Mortal Kombat actually managed to stick to the original concept of the video game, where it was like this tournament, and the villain Shang Tsung was trying to take over Earth, and you had the heroes fighting for it. It was a very basic concept, and I feel like they translated it to the screen well, whereas the sequel wound up becoming this whole, how can we fit every single character we can imagine into this film, which was part of the problem with Street Fighter. And it just became every 3 minutes. It's like, every 3 minutes. Oh, look, a new character. Oh, look, a new character. Oh, they're dead already. It's it becomes obnoxious at a point.
And what I'm getting with that, with these good movies, like Resident Evil, the first Resident Evil was, I wouldn't say a prequel. It's like a side story compared to the first video game. It's not a whole bunch. It's not 5 people walking into a mansion. It's Alice, Mila Jovovich, with this almost side story that you can see parallel almost to the first game. Where the Mortal Kombat movie, the first movie, was a tournament.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing with Resident Evil is because and the movie came out, right around the time when zombies were becoming the in thing. So it was it was easy enough to make a successful zombie movie, and there wasn't a whole lot from the video game that they incorporated into it, with the exception of the Umbrella Corporation, which is the villainous corporation that starts the virus. Outside of that, I mean, everything else really was just a movie about this one main character, Alice, trying to survive, and then the people who come along and help her along the way. I mean, overall, I thought, again, it was nothing groundbreaking in it, but it was a serviceable film.
Okay.
It
was.
It was a zombie film. It was a horror movie.
And then I think, like, with these movies that didn't do so well, and you can call them campy, you can do whatever you want with them. Like Double Dragon, Doom, House of the Dead, definitely. A lot of these, I think sometimes the lead up, because everyone the fact that they're making like a Double Dragon movie or a Doom movie, people get excited, so that right off the bat is going to start selling tickets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Double Dragon was one of the earliest ones to come out. I think it was like after Super Mario
It was,
Bros.
I think it was shortly after.
It was either shortly, it was shortly after. But, again, that was another one where, again, it was a very basic concept like Super Mario. It was, girl gets kidnapped, save the girl. Instead, they went this route where it was just really over-the-top campy, and they felt the need to create, the characters from the video game that were like over the top, and they didn't really need to. It was really more like all it was more like a street gang movie. If they did it in the vein, of like the Warriors or something, it could have actually been a decent film.
Where the Warriors was a good game based on a film.
That's the other side, yeah.
And I know Double Dragon, and a lot of these video game movies sometimes do this. They try and stick in like just like not homages, but like Double Dragon. I always say the most famous line they got, because what's her name? What was the girl?
Alyssa Milano.
Samantha. Yeah, Alyssa Milano. She's in the movie, so some girl was beating her up, saying, "Oh, now who's the boss?" And then the guy who's the villain was the T-1000. So
Robert Patrick.
Yeah, sometimes they'll throw every movie he's in. They always mention something about Terminator,
of course.
But I think, but that was back then. A lot of these movies were mid '90s, early 2000s. They didn't. This was before with all like the Avengers and Captain America and Batman. I think the superhero movie, the comic book movies, I think are going to help the video game movies, because the comic book movies show you can have a serious movie based on a comic book or a superhero, and now they can do serious movies based on video games. Because the Warcraft movie's coming out next year, 2016, pretty much next year at this point. That's, I'm sure, going to be a serious movie. And, Uncharted, Metal Gear Solid, these are going to be, they can take a serious approach to that.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, you're also now starting to see that they're going after franchises that are ridiculously successful monetarily in the video game world. So in other words, it's like, like Warcraft, Metal Gear, I think even like, if you look at your Call of Duty's Medal of Honors and things like that, those are video games that make like $500 million when they come out, like in sales. Yeah. No, just in sales alone. And, you can only count on your hand how many movies really make $500 million, and usually they're always summer blockbusters.
Yeah, or directed by James Cameron.
But these, so video games like that are already ridiculously successful have the ability to be successful as a film, as long as you have the right people doing it. And again, the other thing to keep in mind now is, like you said, with the comic book movies, it's like you can make a serious film, but on top of that, technology has advanced since, every year technology advances, even from like video game movies from the mid 2000s, there's so many more things that you can do on screen now. I mean, if you look at Warcraft, if Warcraft goes anywhere near the way Lord of the Rings went, you know what I mean? It has the opportunity to be, insanely successful, not to mention the built-in fan base you have with it from online. So the opportunity is definitely there. It's just, it all comes down to the execution.
Exactly, and that's pretty much every movie.
More or less.
And then some of the, it's weird, and they've tried, even not just video games, like board games. I mean, we all remember, Battleship. And, which I still say if it was called any other movie but Battleship, it would be a fun alien invasion movie.
So if they called it Ship Battle.
That's fine. If it had nothing to do with the board game, I think it would have been a fun alien attack movie. But because it had the Battleship moniker to it, that's the other thing, too. They got to make sure that they're not just signing away just the names for the sake of a name. I mean, like, they were talking about a Tetris movie, they were talking about a Pac-Man movie, they were talking about a Chutes and Ladders movie at some point.
Yep.
Or Candyland. You know, I know there's more
Candyland,
board games, but...
Candyland actually, I think, like, that was, like, being planned by Adam Sandler, if I remember correctly.
Well, that's leading into Pixels that's coming out
Yeah.
this year. That's based, actually, Pixels is based on a short, a video short, which you can find on YouTube, which is phenomenal. It's actually very fun. They got the rights to a lot of companies on that one. I don't know how they're going to pull it off, but they just started coming out with the posters for that movie, Pixels, and so far they're really cool. Like, it's giant Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, like in a 3D pixelated, just eating up Manhattan or destroying Manhattan. So
hey, that sounds like fun to me.
So, but what I'm saying is, you got to be careful also, just not to. Just to sign away the rights of a movie name just for the sake of a movie name.
Well, I mean, the thing is, again, it's and this is I think this is just the film industry as a whole. It's you take less of a risk when you sign the rights to something that's already established. Mm-hmm. So now, I mean, we're getting to the point where, granted, video games are starting to get rated, not to the degree that comic books are, but everybody's seen how ridiculously successful comic book movies are becoming, so now they're starting to dip into the other wells that are out there, and the other wells are video games and board games and stuff like that. So, you know, just by using a board game, like, oh my god, Candyland, it's like, you know, so many people know what Candyland is, and when you think about it, it's like, oh, if you think about it, it makes a great idea for a kids movie. So it's just the idea of using that franchise's name to already get buzz about it. If you made a Candyland like movie and did not use the title Candyland, it wouldn't have that already built-in foundation, and that's what it really comes down to, and that's why we see you know the film industry constantly, milking all of these, pre-established franchises for what they're worth, because there's less risk involved.
Which is probably why Halo was always on the back burner and eventually was just never made. I think, and what's his name? Peter Jackson was supposed to do the Halo movie.
Yes.
And I think he just kind of backed off because he just couldn't find the right story for it. Because you got to imagine, if a Halo movie came out, forget about it.
Oh, it would be huge. But again, it's like, what's the story? You know what I mean?
Maybe not now, but in the past.
Yeah, what's the story? Who's the who's the main character? It all comes down to that.
And in that one, the main character doesn't talk. Master Chief doesn't talk. Which, personally, I think you can get away with if you do it right, at least for the core audience.
Well, I mean,
because anything, it would be like, you don't want to go the route of, like, the first Judge Dredd movie, where, Stallone takes the mask off in the first 5 minutes of the movie, which never happened in the comic book or in the Carl Urban version.
Yeah, well, I mean, but again,
I didn't see that one,
but again, it's so difficult to create a film where your main character doesn't speak. It's like, it really is. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the only film that comes to mind for me that I thought was really, really solid with the main character who barely spoke, and it was WALL-E. WALL-E, granted, as the movie went on, they introduced other characters which wound up speaking, but WALL-E himself barely spoke, and it was visually stunning, and his story was just fantastic, and he didn't need to speak to tell the story. Mm-hmm. But again, translating that over into like what I would only consider would be like a sci-fi action kind of film, like with Halo, I honestly don't know how you would be able to do that without having your main character. Yeah, and the cool thing about technology, again, now is it's cheap. Video cameras are cheap now. You can go out and buy a GoPro for like $250 or $350, and you can film your own stuff. I mean, I remember like a few years ago there was an April Fool's joke on IGN.com, and it was a Legend of Zelda trailer, and it looked pretty legit. And I was like, "Oh crap!" I go, this looks pretty." I mean, for what it was, I'm like, "This looks low budget." I go, but it looks intriguing to me. I'm a big Zelda fan, though, of course. And then I found out it was a joke. I'm like, oh, man. I was like, that kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, anybody can really go out there and do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the ability to do it. Hell, I've been trying to do it for years now. So, just not in the video game realm, per se.
Oh, man. So, but yeah, I think with the gist of this whole show, as far as what we're talking about today, I think the past is in the past. With the video game movies, we have them. They're in the history. Some of them are just fun to watch for a laugh. But I think moving forward, the world has changed, the climate has changed, and I think we can get more serious movies based on video games, and I think we have some good stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, I think so too. I think what we need to be on the lookout for in terms of video game movies is what's going to be the one that sets the trend. Because with comic book movies suffered the same thing that video game movies did for a very long time until X-Men came out in 2000. And when X-Men came out, all of a sudden everybody realized, oh, look, you can make a successful comic book franchise into a movie. Now, you're talking about, when you go look at X-Men had, you're talking about a comic book that started in 1963. So at that point, you're talking about 37 years of history that, and they made a film that was barely, well, I don't even think it was a 2-hour film. It was like an hour 40, hour 45.
Just about.
Right. And you're talking, and again, in X-Men, hundreds of characters that they narrowed down to like 5 or 6. When you count the bad guys, a little bit more, but still, it's like they were able to really hone in on one lead character, Wolverine, have the support team around him and create a really good movie. And now you fast forward to 2014 and we were looking at, I think, like the 7th, movie from the X-Men franchise. With Days of Future Past, which, by the way, I thought was absolutely excellent. And we're talking 14 years since the first one.
Yep.
But to me, X-Men was the one that set the trend where it's like, hey, you know what? You can make a good comic book superhero movie.
Make it serious.
Right. And now you look at like the success of Iron Man, Avengers, Captain America, and stuff like that. We've come so far. Video games just need that one movie to spark that, to say, holy crap, there can be an amazing, you can make an amazing movie out of a video game franchise.
And I think that's probably going to be Warcraft, to be honest with you. I think depending on the success of Warcraft, you're going to see the more or less of the genre.
Yeah, because if that one can't do it, I don't know what will.
All right. So, all right, we're going to start to wrap this one up. But, if you have any ideas, you can definitely, let us know about it. RetroGamer.com. RetroGamers.com. It's new.
Oh, the Retro Gamers.
The Retro Gamers. I'll figure it out.
TheRetroGamers.com. It's still under construction.
But you may be able to put some ideas up there. And we're going to get a Twitter going full-time in a little bit. We'll get an email going full-time so I can remember the address. But in the meantime, thank you very much for downloading, listening, and looking forward to the next show. In the meantime, I'm Larry.
And I'm Anthony.
Enjoy your video gaming, and enjoy all the retro gaming. Good night, everybody.